sisters, if you're right here in today's House of Justice at the Sheraton Hotel, or if you're watching us virtually, I want you to... Okay, I'm sorry. All right, I'm just going to bring on our president and founder, the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton.
Good morning, good morning. Let me thank Attorney Hardy for presiding in our first hour live on 1190 WLIB, as we do every Saturday. And you that are here, we are not at the House of Justice, though we're there live, and we're live streaming there, and live streaming on YouTube and Facebook and www.nationalactionnetwork.net. One of the things that I'm very happy about is that we have had tens of thousands tune in every day for this virtual conference. And last year, because of the pandemic, we did not have a conference or convention. This year, we decided to do it virtual. And I must give credit to Ebony Riley, heading our Washington, D.C. office, and Katrina Jefferson here, and Dominique Sharpton, who's over membership. They put this together. And we've had virtual numbers that I did not think we'd reach every day. And I want to give them a big hand. The first day was on, we had everyone from President Biden speak to Attorney General Garland speak to the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, to Chuck Schumer, then Ben Crump and the Mothers of the Movement, then on and on and on. Our legal panel with Attorney Hardy, then on, we've had 12 secretaries and cabinet members and the ambassador to the UN. So it's been a successful our media panel of everyone from Charles Blow to Cheryl Wills to you name them, and a very successful week. And we end the day, young people this afternoon and evening with their youth panels, though they've been intersected, our Reverend Rivers and our religious leaders, the new presiding bishop of the Church of God in Christ, the heads of the Baptist organizations. Last night, Bishop Noel Jones and Bishop Jordan. So it's been a great convention. You that have come from around the country, we were only allowed 150 people in the hotel total, including staff, press, and everybody. That's the bad news. So it put thousands on the virtual. The good news is, though, that everybody in here is COVID negative because you had to be tested to get in here. So this is one of the few sessions I've been in a year that I could bump everybody's hand and not go run and wash my hands right away, because I know y'all been tested because y'all couldn't get up in here without being tested. Some folk didn't come because they didn't want to be tested. And I said, anybody don't want to be tested, I don't want to talk to after, because you've got a reason you don't want to be tested. We, every year, though, on our last day, have measured the movement. Part of the movement is the intersectional relationship between existing legacy organizations. One of the things that I think has weakened many movements is we have this kind of competitive spirit rather than a cooperative spirit. And learning that if we all ride down our lane and all understand we headed to the same place, that we will all get there. And the only time you have an accident is if you switch lanes without a signal. And one of the things that we've tried to do in National Action Network and this is our 30th year. We'll be having the 30th anniversary in October, though we started in March. But we're going to have a big to-do in October after the pandemic lets up a little more. But one of the things we've tried to do in those 30 years is work in unison with others. And our legacy organization, I remember when we started in 91, and we were in the middle of the fight for justice in Bensonhurst with Yusef Hawkins. NAN was founded marching in Bensonhurst. And now we, 30 years later, are in the middle of the fight for justice for George Floyd. And on this Monday, we'll be closing arguments on George Floyd, and on that afternoon or evening, the judge will charge the jury, and we'll be there until the verdict comes back. I'll be going out there Monday morning. Been talking to family every day. I've been out there 3 times. We have prayer with the family every day, and we'll be with them until the verdict comes. If the verdict comes Monday, Tuesday, we don't know. Or Wednesday, we just don't know. And we're going to have to be there till Thursday anyway, because Thursday I'm doing the eulogy for young brother Wright, who was killed right up the about 10 miles away in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. So when we look at the fact that in this one period of time, we've seen what has happened with Donjay Wright, the trial of George Floyd. Now we have the case in Chicago, another person shot in Oregon. We are in very serious times that we cannot afford not to have operational unity. And in that spirit, we've always ended the last day would measure the movement, where we get the leaders of those traditional organizations, and they've always honored that, and we come to theirs to sit with us and let's talk about what everybody is doing in their respective organizations. They're members of NAN, I'm members of theirs, because it's all about our being together. So let us go forward and begin that. We are joined now live on also Impact Television. Every Saturday we're on Impact, as well as WLIB Live, as well as YouTube and all of that, whatever else y'all got that I don't even know about these young folk got. I was listening to Talik, the young people will take over this afternoon, Talik, talking about that elephant and the dog. I hadn't heard that one, Talik. I'm going to do that another way, I'll tell you now. You're going to hear that again, but it's going to be sharptonized. I'm going to use that. Let us welcome our panel of legacy organization leaders. Let us recognize the president and CEO of the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation, Melanie Campbell. Damon Hewitt, the acting president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights under the Law. Derek Johnson, president and CEO of the NAACP. Queen Mother of Black America, Dr. Janetta Cole, chair and national president, National Council of Negro Women. And here in the at the convention site, we're honored to have our brother. We used to call him the 61st Senator, Wade Henderson, the interim president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. And no stranger to NAN and no stranger to Black America, the president and CEO of the National Urban League, the one and only Mark Morial. Let me start by asking the panel to give us as I've outlined the immediate challenges around the policing, from the case of George Floyd to the case of Brother Wright now in Brooklyn Center, to the case in Chicago. What approach does your organization take, and how do you define the time that we're in and where we need to go to deal with policing? We have the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We have state measures. Explain to us exactly where your organizations are moving and where we collectively need to move at this time. Let's start with Melanie Campbell.
Thank you, Reverend, and thank you to National Action Network for this opportunity. It is always an honor to be with my colleagues and all of our folks in the movement. My organization, National Coalition of Black Civic Participation, of course, Black Women's Roundtable, we follow you. First of all, we follow National Action Network and support of the work that you do on the ground when it comes to these issues around policing and criminal justice reform. And also, of course, our legal organizations as it relates to when it comes to legal strategy around these issues. So what we've been doing, we just hosted our 10th annual Black Women's Roundtable Women of Power National Summit. It was one of the critical issues that we pushed for our day on Capitol Hill, which was, of course, virtual in this time, as one of the key issues. Rev, we do research every year, partner with Essence Magazine, and one of the last 3 years, the top 3 issues of concern for Black women, why we wanted to vote, what we wanted the elected officials that we voted for to address, the number 1 issue for us has been racism, systemic racism, structural racism, eradicating that. And number 2 has been criminal justice and policing reform for the last 3 years. So for us, and then the third is COVID-19. And so for us, we know from a policy perspective the importance of that. And so our goal is, 1, to work in coalition with you and others who lead in this kind of work, but also from leveraging the Black women's electoral power to push from an advocacy perspective to make change, and that change has to happen now. And of course, lastly, working with our young people through Black You Vote, who are on the ground out there fighting every day on the ground and being on the front line along with you and many others around these issues, and supporting our young leadership, investing in them, putting funds into their organizations to help push this so we can make the change, the systemic change that has to be made so they can stop killing black bodies with impunity these days.
All right, let us hear from Mark Morial, National Urban League.
Hey, Reverend Sharpton, thank you very much. Let's give Reverend Sharpton a big round of applause. Give him a round of applause, and I want to thank Reverend Sharpton for his friendship, brotherhood, and just indefatigable leadership in every instance. So, Reverend, thank you for having me back again. Let me quickly characterize. We are in a state of emergency. A state, say state of emergency.
State of emergency.
And we're dealing with 3 pandemics. COVID, the economic downturn, 11 million people are out of work. And thirdly, the pandemic of racial justice. And the tip of that pandemic is the violence that our particularly young men have had to confront at the hands of those who sworn to protect and serve us. It's a pandemic, and it continues. And what can we do? Number 1, we cannot be quiet. We cannot be quiet. Our voices have to be raised. And we must take the mantra that we are going to confront it, call it out, and work for change by any means necessary. Let me underscore non-violently, before some of these pencil pushers take it out of context. But we have to be unflinching. When I saw the 13-year-old boy, when I saw Daunte Wright, my stomach turned. And all I would say is, one context about now is, 5 years ago, we fought for body cams. We didn't win that battle completely, but many, many, many more police departments require body cams. These body cams are giving us a front seat view, Reverend Sharpton, to what happens, which is important because in the old days, we always confronted the big lie. He threatened me. He grabbed for my gun. And we never knew what happened because we were trying to defend the integrity of a dead person in that instance. So we cannot be quiet. What do we want to fight for? It's a re-envisioning of public safety. How public safety takes place in our community. It goes beyond law enforcement. It goes to an economy. It goes to jobs. It goes to quality housing. It goes to ending health disparities. It goes to ending redlining and investing in our communities. The other thing we must do is we must call the question with every single elected official that comes around. Whether they are running for the city council, the mayor, for Congress, the United States Senate, are you committed to ending police violence and reforming the system of criminal justice in this country? And what do we want them to do? If they're a federal official, we want their commitment to the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. We want their commitment. And look, it is not perfect because there's no such thing as a perfect law. But it is a measure where we're saying to the Congress, go on record in support of something. It's passed the House twice. Now it's pending in the Senate. Join our fight to put pressure and elevate the message of the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. What else can you do? Just last week, Reverend, in Maryland, the Maryland State Legislature passed a law in Maryland which repealed the Police Officers' Bill of Rights and made a number of other changes, and the vote was strong enough that in Maryland it was done notwithstanding the veto of Republican Governor Hogan. So state legislatures can do something. So all I will say on this, and we will come back to this, Reverend Sharpton, you've been on the front line. I sit each night and day and pray for justice in Minneapolis. And I'll say this, I watched the case, and in my early career spent a lot of time in the courtroom. Keith Ellison's prosecutorial team did a thorough job. They not only presented evidence, they presented corroborative evidence on every single element. And I watched the defense's presentation. And there's a term they use down in Texas that I think best describes the defense's presentation. All hat and no cattle. It was an empty suit with a discredited witness who sought to suggest that carbon monoxide poisoning killed George Floyd, and he hadn't even read any report that said that there was any carbon monoxide, and the jury shouldn't believe a word he said. So we'll come back to that, but this is a time for us not to be quiet. This is a time that we have to understand that the work goes on and the struggle continues.
Thank you, Mr. Morial. Let's go to Dr. Janetta Cole of the National Council of Negro Women.
Brother Rev, I'm profoundly grateful for this opportunity to be with my sister and my brothers in struggle on this panel. You, Brother Rev, have on so many occasions, you have found just the right way for us to understand a situation, and then importantly, for us to move in reaction to that situation. I'm raising that up because I'm thinking about your words, Brother Reverend Sharpton. Get your knees off of our necks. This is a moment that we cannot describe as unique in the 401 years that we have been in the United States. But it is a moment which echoes the persistent, violent racism that Black Americans suffer from. When we all saw those moments that we can count as minutes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes and some seconds, taking the life of George Floyd. I know that in the collective memory of Black people, we saw a lynching. And so this is a time, as Brother President Mark Morial said, when we have to stand up and speak out. But we also have to be exceptionally organized. And I could not find the words to say how important it is that the legacy civil rights organizations are in such lockstep communion. You see us here, missing our sister Sherilyn. You see us here, dear sisters and brothers, at this important National Action Network convening. But know that we are in constant touch. And know that to the best of our abilities, when we come together, we check our egos at the door. This is not about which civil rights organization is the best. This is not about which began earlier than another. This is about the exceptional power in collaboration. And so the National Council of Negro Women stands in complete solidarity with the legacy civil rights organizations in calling for minimally the passage of the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. How right Brother President Morale is. There's no perfect law. We shouldn't be spending our time picking at something when we have the opportunity to make a fundamental change in the relationship between those who carry badges and are said to be the enforcers of law and the countless women, men, and children in our communities. The National Council of Negro Women has no interest whatsoever in separating the rights of black women and the rights of black men. Going that way leads to nothing but more systemic racism and more systemic sexism. We will not be divided, black women from black men. But we also, in the National Council of Negro Women, remind us that whatever the issue is, black women are suffering from it. We tend, for example, to call the names of our brothers, our black men killed for being black. That's some black woman's son. That's some black woman's partner. And when, for no justifiable reason, police shoot into the place called home of Breonna Taylor, it's one of us. And so if there ever was a time when we in the civil rights organizations must be in lockstep, it is now. And I want to say to my sister Mel, to all of the brothers who come together, we are so much stronger when we're together than when we are separated. Finally, thank you, Brother Rev, for all that you do. It's not clear to me how you do it. In fact, I have a theory that somebody actually managed to clone Reverend Al Sharpton. And that's why we see him everywhere. That's why there is no issue of importance to black people when he is not there. And so with profound gratitude to you, Brother Rev, the National Council of Negro Women is ready and able.
Thank you, Dr. Janetta Cole. Let us now hear from my brother Derek Johnson, President and CEO of the NAACP.
Good morning, Rev. Good morning to all the panelists. And first of all, Rev, I need to get your tailor because I appreciate you bringing the three-piece suit back. So I need to get some vests. I want to congratulate Nan on this 30th year of existence. Your voice has resonated loud and clear, and we appreciate your voice, your advocacy, and how you have brought forward this question of police violence in our community for many years. And what's at stake here is a question of trust and safety. We lack trust in far too many communities across the country around the very agencies our tax dollars are paying for. We're not feeling safe in our communities with the law enforcement officers who sometimes show up on our block at our door. And that has been a consistent problem in this country for years. You think about the Fugitive Slave Act and the creation of far too many of our police agencies were established because they were in pursuit of runaway Africans seeking freedom to bring them back to put them in systems of slavery. If you think about many of our correctional facilities, they started off after the Civil War, after the ending of Reconstruction, as penal farms so that landowners can reinstitute a system of free and cheap labor. If you think about even the founding of the NAACP, it was reaction to lynching that was taking place across the country. In fact, on average, there was a black person being lynched every day. And in many of those cases, they were done in the public square where people would gather around and view. And a part of the folks carrying out the lynchings were law enforcement officers who would get people out of the local jail, take them to the square for the public lynching. If you think about what happened over the last 7 years, those were law enforcement agencies and or officers acting with a level in which their badge became their shield to protect them from accountability. And what we must do is hold people accountable. That's why the act that's moving that's in the Senate now becomes so important, that we do away with qualified immunity. That's why it's important that there's an establishment of a federal registry so we can identify police misconduct. So the officer in Virginia who caused that assault on a U.S. military lieutenant cannot be fired there and go to the neighboring jurisdictions and be hired because his record won't follow him. We must build more trust in law enforcement agencies so our communities can be safe. That only happens if we have federal policy infrastructure in place to do that. And the Fraternal Order of Police is not our friend in that case, because until there is accountability, and I wanted to say whether it's with the jurisdiction or the individual, there must be accountability, because people will go up to the limits that are allowed. And for our communities, through the history in this country, we have allowed people to operate under the color of law, under their badge, to create harm against our people. So to you, to Nan, and to all the work that you have done to bring attention to this, not with just this most recent series of episodes, but you have been a leading voice in this space. For the NAACP, we recognize very clearly, social justice isn't a competition, it's an opportunity to lend your voice for equity and justice. And if people choose organizational vehicles to raise their voice, we should celebrate that and figure out how best to align our voices, because history has taught us none of us have the total solution. All of us have a piece of the solution, and we should bring all of our pieces together to come up with the solution. Thank you, Rev. Thank you, Nan, for your
Thank you. Give a hand. Let us hear now from Damon Hewitt, who is the acting president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights.
Thank you, Rev, for your leadership. Thank you, fellow leaders, for all that you do and welcoming me into this community, this circle of trust, of leadership, of action. Rev, on the issue that you called the question on these issues about policing, I just want to acknowledge that you were at this before a lot of our organizations were, quite honestly, specifically on local policing. In New York City, and being in New York, working there for over a dozen years, I came to understand the role that you played, the role that Nan played in laying the groundwork for us to come together as we are today, and as we have been throughout this season of this crisis, this moment of crisis, as Brother Mark Morial put it, because it is a crisis facing us in our communities and nationwide. So many speakers have said so much that's important. What I want to talk about a little bit is about this trust point that Brother President Derrick Johnson spoke about. We hear a lot from, including our friends who work in law enforcement, about trust, about we need, community trust. And it's almost as if they want us to trust them, but they don't trust us.
Yeah.
They don't give us that benefit of the doubt. And so wherever you are, whether it's in a relationship, in a family, in the neighborhood, in the club, in the organization, or with the state that has a monopoly on the authorized use of force, there can be no trust without accountability. There can be no accountability without transparency. And there can be no real transparency without access to accurate and reliable information that allows us to be informed, allows us to act, and that ties everything together. And frankly, there can't be any trust if people don't tell the truth. I want to lift up the sister Aisha Braveboy, who's the state's attorney, the lead prosecutor in Prince George's County, Maryland. She has followed the trend that so many other prosecutors at the local and county level have had to do, when they've had to create lists of police officers in their jurisdiction who have such a strange relationship, a Trumpian relationship with the truth, that they can't even call these people as witnesses. She had to create such a list, right? That means we can't trust the police to police us. We can't trust the police to police themselves. Now, we want to be able to do that, right? Because we deserve safety, but we deserve safety on our terms, on terms that work for us, where we're not crying at a clip of almost every week of somebody being killed, where we're not dying in these streets at the hand of the state. We need to build trust in an authentic way based upon the right foundation of accountability, transparency, and frankly, truth. Because you can't have any type of trust without those pieces. Now, some of the speakers have talked about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We stand with you in supporting it. As Brother Mark Morial said, it is not perfect, and there's ways that the legislation can be strengthened. But we are so pleased that it has passed the House of Representatives without people on other sides trying to strip it apart and water it down. Because as much as you want to strengthen it, there's an equal danger of that legislation being watered down. And so I really want to lift up what I know our sister Sherilyn will lift up if she were here with us, is from the Legal Defense Fund, is the 1-2 punch that this thing brings. And for us as lawyers, it matters because it gives us what we need to fight for our communities in court. It's one, the stripping of qualified immunity, as others have said. It's a judge-made doctrine. This is not a law. It certainly is not in the Constitution of the United States, but it is judge-made law that has been codified at the state level in some way, shapes, and forms that says basically you can get away with almost anything if you say, or if we think you didn't have reason to know you were violating someone's rights. Now, in theory, it might make some sense, but in practice, it's essentially a get-out-of-jail-free card. We also have the second part of that 1-2 punch, which is criminal sanctions. Without getting the details, there's a reason why, Rev, in so many of even the most egregious incidents, the killing of Sean Bell, the killing of Tamir Rice, and so many of these incidents, you don't just see failed prosecutions at the federal level, you see no prosecutions at the federal level.
Right.
Because the bar has been set so high that it makes it almost impossible to have the federal government come in and intervene. And we see what happens at the state level. We pray for the best for some semblance of justice in the trial of Derek Chauvin. It is not the George Floyd trial, as people like to say, because George Floyd is not on trial, right? It is Chauvin who is on trial for murder. We pray for the best, but we also need that federal hammer to be able to come in as well, right? And so without the civil liability, with this shield of qualified immunity, which essentially means full immunity in most cases, without the ability of a criminal sanction and prosecution at the federal level as a backstop, officers get to act with impunity. Now look, people will try to say, Brother Morial talked about the pencil pushers. They'll say, oh, these folks are anti-police. This is what you hear from the police unions. The police unions who frankly have a strained relationship with the truth and reality as well. Because the officer who killed Tamir Rice, they want to appeal the firing, right? They've stepped in to do that. It's almost as if they can see no wrong. They can hear no evil, see no evil, right? That everything is just about protecting officers no matter what. That's not about accountability. That's not a way to build trust, right? So that's a pressure point that we have to hit. But overall, if we come together and we stand together and we work in righteous protests in the streets, if we work in the courts, if we work in the halls of Congress and power, and we demand our version of trust, I believe we can get there on our watch.
Woo.
All right. Damon Hewitt, acting president of the Lawyers Committee. Let us conclude this round, and then I'm going to go around one more time on another issue, and we will be at our 11 o'clock point. Let's hear from our 101st Senator, Wade Henderson.
Oh, good morning, family. Good morning. It's good to see all of you here. Reverend Sharpton, thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you for convening this important panel of the leaders of the so-called legacy organizations, the organizations that, when taken together, have helped drive the change that we as a people stand for when it comes to American democracy. We are the heart of building the more perfect union that we celebrate in the songs and legends of this country. I'm honored to be a part of this panel. We're missing this morning the voice of Sherilyn Ifill of the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, an integral part of our broad community, and when taken together, it is such an honor to know that we have the support of the African American community in speaking for the collective interests that we share. So I'm honored to be here this morning. As Reverend Sharpton said, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights helps coordinate the legislative strategy to advance issues like the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and other bills that affect the interests of our community. Brother Morial this morning talked about the three faces of the pandemic that are affecting the country today. The health crisis that we know is evident all around us. The economic crisis, on whose backs, our backs, we in fact carry that burden. And the crisis for racial justice in our country. Those three elements of the pandemic indeed have been devastating. But there is also a fourth element of the pandemic, and that is the pandemic for American democracy. Democracy is in peril, folks, like never before. Now, starting in 2016, from 2016 to 2020, we had a president who came to us and said, well, vote for me. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? Well, 560,000 deaths later, knowing that the black community has borne the burden of this pandemic more than any other group. The irony of having us designated as, essential workers, but treated like crap in the job, in the salaries, and the protections that we get, it's a horrible reality. I remember looking at some of those rallies that used to take place every week, and someone at the helm would lean over and say, oh, where's my black? Where's my black? And he'd say, well, I love black people. I love them. Yeah, well, look at all the devastation he has caused. He loves you all right. He loved you like a tornado loved a trailer park, okay? And so we know that you can say a lot, but unless you are bringing change to the table, then you are not doing anything for our interests. Now, it is Congress of the United States that has the power to pass laws. And while we love Joe Biden and what he has done at the start of his presidency to elevate concerns of racial justice and to talk about protecting our interests, it's going to take more than just one man, Joe Biden, to bring about the change that we need. A lot of that change rests in Congress. It is only Congress that can pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. It is only Congress that can ensure that the American Recovery act that brings jobs to the community and dollars to the institutions that we serve. It's only Congress that has that power. And right now, we are in serious danger of losing democracy as we know it. The first stage of that was the big lie that was told for the last 2 years, that if someone lost the presidency, it could only happen by virtue of voter fraud. That was the big lie. And that big lie begat an insurrection that almost brought down the American government on January 6th. Haven't seen anything like it since the War of 1812. That was the last time the U.S. Capitol had been breached. But now we are seeing the second stage of that insurrection, and it's happening in states all around the country. They want to make sure, that is, and look, this is not a partisan program, but unfortunately it is Republicans at the helm of this regressive action. I have to say that. When I look at what happened in Georgia with legislation that has been passed that has the effect of disenfranchising black and progressive voters to make sure that Georgia will never elect another African American senator in our lifetime, like Reverend Raphael Warnock, pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. When we see laws that are designed to prevent progressive voices from speaking out, like Senator John Ossoff, the first Jewish American elected to the Senate from the South. And when we see that effort being repeated in states like Texas and Arizona and Michigan and Florida, we know that if we close our eyes for just a minute, we will be shut out of this process like never before. Now, brothers and sisters, there is a reality in America. If you don't vote, you don't count. Voting is the language of democracy. If you don't vote, you don't count. And if you can't vote, if you are denied the right to vote, you can close off democracy as we know it and make sure that only those with money, the elites, those who do not support progressive interests, are in power. So what you're seeing now with that Georgia voting rights bill, if that is allowed to migrate to other states in the country, brothers and sisters, we are in big trouble. Now, there are two bills that are pending in Congress that, along with the George Floyd bill, I consider absolutely essential for our interests. One is the For the People Act, known now as S1. It passed the House. It's now pending in the Senate. The other is the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, named after the great John Lewis, and that would restore the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that was dealt a virtual death blow by the Supreme Court back in 2013. If we don't get those two laws fixed, if we don't stand up for democracy as we know it, the chances of getting the George Floyd bill, the chances of getting the economic recovery that is absolutely essential, the chances of getting the jobs that our community so desperately needs, and the chances of getting the respect that we deserve in the country in which we live. If we don't get these bills passed, we are in serious trouble. So our efforts, our collective efforts, are being devoted, yes, to the passage of the George Floyd bill, but also to the passage of voting rights laws that we know are absolutely essential to our interests. And so the Leadership Conference is proud to stand with our brother and sister organizations, part of the legacy groups that Reverend Sharpton has done so much to bind together and to speak with a unified purpose. If we cannot deliver those interests in the next year, while this, the 117th Congress, the Congress that was just elected back in November, if we don't do that, then you might as well close shop, guys, because the truth is we won't be able to sustain ourselves against the forces, the regressive forces that are committed to turning back the clock in everything we do. And you see evidence of that in lots of ways, big and small. That last White House gave license to white supremacists to take off their sheets and hoods and speak up openly about a country that no longer exists. Thanks to us and thanks to the demographic change that has taken place, we stand on the cusp of producing the America of the 21st century that we embrace and support. But brothers and sisters, we have got to wake up and recognize that if we don't speak up and if we don't mobilize our communities, black women and black men together, speaking up and bringing truth to power, we're in serious trouble. So I'm going to stop by saying this. I think Reverend Sharpton has done a phenomenal job in helping to bring collectively the legacy organizations, the organizations that have driven change in this country since 1909 when the NAACP was founded, up through the present time. Those are the groups we together with the people who are here in this audience, both present and virtual, are the real heartbeat of change in this country. And we have got to assume our rightful role in saving democracy. It was Jim Clyburn, congressman from South Carolina, who saved American democracy by endorsing Joe Biden at a time when his campaign was in serious trouble. And that's not intended as a partisan comment. It is a recognition that this presidency has had a different view and attitude toward our interests than the previous occupant. So, brothers and sisters, I'm going to stop here. I want to thank you for your support.
Wade Henderson, give him a hand.
Appreciate it. All right.
We're about 10 minutes before we have to close and our TV switches to our youth panel, but I want to give everybody 2 minutes, and I'm going to switch from being president of NAN to being host of Politics Nation. I'm going to hold you to 2 minutes like I do on TV. By the way, this evening, Ben Crump is going to break some news on Politics Nation, as well as we're going to do reparations with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee.
Here, here.
So when I slip out from the youth, it's because I have to go do my show. We want to give everybody 2 minutes to round up, particularly mentioning, as Wade did, about the vote. 47 states have proposed new voting laws in one form or another. So let's go around for an end run, 2 minutes each. Let's start with Mark Morial, National Urban League.
Very quickly, I think something interesting has happened in the last week, and that's been the mobilization of a number of business voices, Reverend Sharpton. But it's important to recognize that that took place because a group of black business executives, led by Ken Chenault, Ken Frazier, Ursula Burns, and Bill Lewis, decided that they were going to speak out and really call out corporate America to take a stand on democracy. What is important is that what we are trying to do in support of the protection of the vote is build the broadest possible coalition of people who want to protect the right to vote, the essentiality of democracy. Wade referenced it. For me, January 6th is a day of American disgrace. January 6th is a day that told us that for some, democracy is not the aim. Power is. Power is. So we have got to fight and fight in all of these states at the national level. But let me tell you what stands in the way. H.R. S1 and H.R. 4 would stop this suppression in its tracks. What stands in the way of that is the Senate filibuster. So you're going to be hearing more about that. We can get to 51 votes in the United States Senate because we have the power that the people gave the new majority, along with the vice president, to be able to do this. But let's keep this issue high up on all of our radar screens. Now, it might not be happening here in New York. There might not be a voter suppression effort here in New York, but where there isn't, We ought to be fighting to tell the legislature to expand access to the ballot, to do everything possible to make it, if you will, yes, easier for people to be able to vote. So this fight has got to continue, and once again, we are in a state of emergency.
Melanie Campbell, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Rev. Thank you for this opportunity. Very quickly, I did all that my colleagues have stated, especially around if we cannot get these voting rights bills passed in this Congress, in this calendar year, we face all of the backlash, what is happening on a state level in all of the state elections and all of the congressional races that'll happen in 2022. The midterm election is already here. And we have to, what I say, do black voting 365. And so also because we have governor's races and in New Jersey and in Virginia, and we have several state legislative races and local elections, we have to, as we walk and chew gum at the same time, we have to fight the fight, what's going on in Washington, D.C., but we also have to simultaneously do all we can to make sure that we expand the franchise on the ground. The National Coalition we're celebrating our 45th anniversary, but just rededicating and just continuing to push, and we have to, and it cannot be stated any more than it has been. We are in a state of emergency, and failure is not an option in this moment. This is the moment that we have to put it all in, all cross generations, whether you are a new organization or old organization. One of the critical things I think that is wrong in our movement right now is that we are so bifurcated in ways that we are splitting ourselves around generations, or I'm more progressive than you are, and all these other kinds of things that are blocking us being laser focused on making the change that is necessary and speaking truth to power and continue to fight in the midst of still a pandemic that we have to continue to fight. So I'm here representing the National Coalition, Black Women's Roundtable, and doing everything we're going to do that we have to do to make change. And the voting rights that have to be passed will allow us to either move forward or move backwards. So I'm there. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek Johnson, NAACP.
Thank you, Rev, for pulling together the panel. 3 very quick points here. 1, black folks need a reason to turn back out in 2022, and I think the administration have had a good start. The commitment, cabinet will look like America, it looks like America. Commitment, getting money out the door to address this global pandemic, with $2 trillion have gotten out the door. Commitment. The infrastructure bill should be a strong job creation opportunity for Black America. And we need to push that, because if you're talking about moving $2.8 trillion out the door for municipalities to improve their water quality, that should equal jobs. That should not equal more consultant opportunities for folks outside the community. That should be about jobs. So reasons for folks to turn out. Secondly, we have to address segregation era procedural rules in the Senate. Mark talked about the filibuster rule, also the blue slip, and all the other rules in the Senate that have been used historically to impede progress, especially around racial equity. But in this case, the filibuster, the blue slip, none of that should stop the Senate from passing protections to open up our democracy. We should not send our young people abroad to fight for democracies that's been impeded here. And then finally, thirdly, it was Machiavellian said, in times of peace, prepare for war. We got to be prepared now for 2022. We won in November, but preparation is now for 2022, but that preparation must be aligned with folks feeling the opportunity of a new administration. We can't tell people go vote if they ain't fill it in their pocketbooks between now and November. So prepare for war in this time of peace. Thank you, Rev, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Janetta Cole. Dr. Janetta Cole.
My brother Rev, it seems to me that if we ever wanted to acknowledge our power, it is now. What we are seeing in Republican-dominated state houses is a reaction to the power of Black people. We showed up and we voted. Indeed, we made it possible, not only for Joe Biden to be in the White House, but for a woman of color, a black woman, a woman from India ancestry, to be the Vice President of the United States of America. We did that. But because our power is so obvious, the reaction, the pushback is severe. But that's all right. Because when they go low, we have learned we go vote.
That's right. All right. Damon Hewitt.
Rev, guest, it's not just about elections or any elections, it's not just about the vote. It's about votes, voice, vitality of black people. And that's all about power. Dr. Cole said it so well, but I'll add to that. What good is power if you don't use it? It will atrophy and it will die. It'll be gone before you know it. And some of us think sometimes we don't have power, we don't have resources, this, that, the other. We have power. We have everything we need. We just have to come together and use it. And in that same vein, one of the things we can do is pressure our elected officials and tell them what we want. And in the spirit of what Dr. Cole said about who we got elected, I also think it's important who we get appointed. Many of you know my good friend, our good friend and colleague, Kristen Clark, has been nominated to serve as Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights of the United States of America. She'll be the first woman and first black woman to lead in that way. Call your senator, 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. You can get to any senator in the country that way and let them know that you want to see her confirmed to lead the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice.
All right.
All right.
And I hope you that are watching virtually and we getting the numbers. We had a huge number on opening day when President Biden number. We're about almost there now. So all you tens of thousands watching, get that number 202-224-3121. All right, we're gonna have it wrapped up by Wade Henderson.
Thank you, brother. Brothers and sisters, I want to use my closing remarks to lift up, to acknowledge, and to thank the young people, the young people of our community and the young people of the country as a whole, for lifting up their voices and demanding change. Lift them up. The status quo is unacceptable. They are not prepared to inherit a world in which they remain the discriminated victims of American democracy. They are not prepared to accept that. Young people have historically been the tip of the spear. We can all remember when Reverend Sharpton was a younger man, pushing as a youth to bring about change in this country. We can all remember people in our communities when they were younger driving change, from Dr. King to John Lewis to a host of others, Fannie Lou Hamer. They are the people who say enough is enough, and they are the ones who give us energy and license in their name to demand a more perfect union. We owe them a debt of gratitude, and one way of repaying that debt is to make sure they inherit a better world in which their voices will be given equal weight to the voices of others, regardless of where they were born, regardless of their zip code, regardless of how much wealth they bring to the table. So we have to do things to make a better world for them. We've talked about a lot of it today. But don't forget eliminating student loan debt for black students who are in college and who need relief. Don't forget about the young people who need jobs when they're young, as a way of preparing them for their responsibilities of tomorrow. I'm from Washington, D.C. I want to lift up Marion Barry, the mayor of Washington, who gave young people jobs when no one else did, and helped lay a foundation for change that we still see rippling through the nation's capital. So I want to close by saying, Reverend, thank you for this panel, and thank you for the panel that will follow in lifting up the voices of the youth of the National Action Network and the country to take their rightful place in a seat at the table. That's what they are demanding, and that's what we have an obligation to give them. Thank you, brothers.
Thank you. Let me say this in closing, and then our youth, we have to do a clean out for COVID, and then the Youth Day starts. But we want to be mindful that we are supporting UN Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, who spoke here 2 days ago. They're attacking her for saying how the country was founded on white supremacy. Her speech here, they're calling for her removal. Ms. Psaki said at yesterday's White House briefing the president was not going to remove her, but I just want you all to be alerted that we're not going to stand by and allow her speech here to be distorted. And I also want to emphasize, as Youth Day starts, after they do their sweep for COVID, every one of the legacy organizations have a youth department, a big youth department in many of them. One of the things they try to separate us is young against old, like the legacy groups don't have young people. Our youth director, youth and college director, Minister Tyleek McMillan, is 24 years old. And some of the people that are claiming to be the youth leaders are in their 30s or 40s. He tell them, y'all are old enough to be my mama. So let's not play the game. NAACP has a strong youth and college division. National Urban League. Let's not play these games. We're all intergenerational organizations and work with other organizations. But I think that we cannot afford to be divided. You that are watching, you've seen the organizations that have been here for a while and will be here a while longer, because it is needed. If you want us to go out of business, stop racism, stop double standards, stop white supremacy, and we can go on and do other things. Thank you. Let us do what we'll be instructed by those. Thank you. Thank you to my panelists.